20th, 2020. We're using Zoom webinar for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. You can also register by going directly to the airport's PFAS website. It's pfas-act.com. And there's a button, a link there to the registration. People registering to be an attendee must use their full names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode and they can click the raised hand button if they choose to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order in which they were raised. If you do not have an audio capable device, you can use a call-in number. We will not be using the YouTube chat function. All questions should be directed through the chair. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members of the commission, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Arthur Gasparo.
Here.
Tony Buscarin.
Here.
Andrea Planzer.
Here.
Jeanette Topham.
Here.
Airport staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Airport manager Tom Rafter.
Here.
Assistant manager Noah Carberg.
Here.
Katie Perales. Katie Perales. Lily Sylvia.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda. Please also respond to the affirmative. Rich Lasden, McFarland Johnson, Inc.
Here.
Mina Macarius, Anderson and Krieger.
Here.
Jim Sokup, Weston Solutions.
Present.
Lisa Kramer, Weston Solutions.
Here.
Jennifer Zorn of McFarland Johnson.
Here.
We are expecting some representatives of the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. I'll read their names. I know one of them is on already. I'm not sure about the other ones. But the group is led by Millie Garcia Serrano, Regional Director for the Southeast Region of Mass DEP. Gerard Martin, Deputy Regional Director of Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup in the Southeast Region of Mass DEP.
I'm here.
And Angela Gallagher, Project Manager for Nantucket Airport for Mass DEP.
Here as well.
Thank you. Is Millie here?
I don't believe she's going to be able to make it this evening.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to Gerard and Angela. We're glad to have you back with us again. Thank you. This open meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. We also allow public participation as outlined previously using Zoom webinar. For this meeting, the commission is convened by video conference via the Zoom webinar app and broadcasting on the Town of Nantucket YouTube channel. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Before we turn to the agenda, Permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to assure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Although we don't anticipate any, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Well, there will be a couple, but anyhow. First, I'll entertain comments on the agenda. The only item on the agenda is from members of the commission. The only item on the agenda is the public information session. Are there any comments from members of the commission? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes,
I'm not seeing this playing on YouTube. On the town YouTube page.
is Mark still on here?
Yeah.
I'm watching it now.
It's playing. I can
You
see
are?
it on the
Okay.
screen right now.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
It must
thank
be
you.
just my screen.
All right, what is going to happen here is that Airport Manager Tom Rafter is going to give a presentation very similar to the one that he gave at the July 29th meeting, but updated, of course. And then we will go into questions from the audience. Again, you can register by going to the website pfas/ac.com and go through the link. And if you want to ask a question, you have to register and use your full name. We have received a number of questions, a few questions, not a number, but a few questions in writing from members of the public. But I think I will hold off on those until the public who are participating in this meeting have an opportunity to ask their questions. So without further ado, Mr. Rafter, would you go ahead, please, and lead us through this exercise?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be sharing my screen in 1 second here. Can everybody see that? Can anybody see that?
I can see it. Yes, go
Yes, I
ahead.
can see it.
I see it, Tom.
So welcome, everyone, and thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance this evening. I know it's Friday at 5 o'clock, so I'll do my best to get through this as quickly as possible, but we do want to address questions and make sure we provide the updated information. Again, as the chairman said, if you'd like to register to ask questions, please visit our website, ack-pfas.com. There's an easy link to get in there. MCP rules and Mass DEP oversight, all actions taken by the airport to investigate and remediate the presence of PFAS are dictated by the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or MCP rules, with oversight by Mass DEP. And thank you for attending this evening. We're appreciative of the representatives that could make it. And these include retaining a licensed site professional, the investigation methods that we use, sampling locations and testing protocol. And to date, we've taken 173 samples, remediation measures, filing of reports with Mass DEP, public availability of reports, and public notification of test results. And all of this information and documents are posted on our website. So if you need any information, it should be posted there. We've broken it down into 3 different study areas, and the initial one was along the ocean there on Maddoxsham Valley Road. We also have one we've labeled the west side, which is primarily along Monahasset Avenue. And then we have the Nobadeer Way study group as well. And you'll see as we go on, you'll see why we broke that down or what the results have been in those areas. So this is a repeat from our first forum. And if you haven't seen that, it's on our website. but it's simply providing the location, the data, the date range, frequency, and estimated discharge in gallons of where AFFF or aqueous film forming foam were dispersed at the airport. So the majority of these are all repetitive from the first one. The sand pits, the runway 6 run up, the Stroney lot, south ramp, runway 24 approach, fuel farm, runway 1533 midpoint, south apron. And then since our last meeting, we discovered another release that was at our, what is known as our SRE building, or snow removal equipment building, over on Bunker Road, and that was in 2015. And we're working to try to obtain the frequency and estimated gallons of what was discharged in that area. So going through the timeline of compliance, a number of major milestones. On March 11th, DEP issued an RFI, request for information, to the airport. We responded to that on April 2nd of 2019. In December, on December 6th, they issued a notice of response action, or NORA, to the airport. And then shortly after Christmas of 19, the DEP established or issued their drinking water standards of 20 parts per trillion for private wells for the sum of 6 PFAS compounds. Then on Valentine's Day, we began testing groundwater on the airport at our Thompson House property. In April, we submitted what is known as an IRA, which is the immediate response action. And on our website, you'll see a number of IRAs that have been submitted, keeping up to date with the information. May 6th of 2020, we began testing the private drinking water wells on Mattox-Sham Valley Road. June 10th through 12th, we were installing POET systems, or point of entry treatment systems. And July 16th, the airport website went live. July 20th, we began testing the wells on the west side of the airport. July 29th, we hosted our first public meeting, just as we're doing this evening. August 4th of 2020, we began testing the wells in the Nobodere Way area. On August 12th, we posted a number of FAQs on the website. September 8th, the Commission authorized a task order for design, permitting, and bid documents for the waterline extension. September 11th, 2020, we started sampling for soil, sampling the soils for PFAS at the Taxiway Echo construction project. October 5th, Mass DEP updated their PFAS fact sheet. And on November 10th, the Airport Commission approved the agreement with Wannacomet Water in the town for the installation of the water line, as well as adopting a policy for connections to existing water line services. And then earlier this week, we began airport-wide soil testing and borings for testing for the PFAS. And tonight we're hosting the second meeting to inform the public and update you where we stand with our results. So just a recap here of the responses that are required under the MCP. For results greater than a non-detect and up to 20 parts per trillionth, we're required to provide verbal or electronic notification of the homeowner, provide bottled water, no treatments necessary, and it may be followed up by quarterly monitoring. For results greater than 20 parts per trillionth up to 200, we have to do a verbal or electronic notification of homeowners, provide bottled water, design and install treatment systems. And for results greater than 200 parts per trillionth, which is deemed an imminent health hazard by Mass DEP, we must provide verbal and electronic notification to the homeowner, provide bottled water, and install treatment systems on an expedited basis. So in that regard, the results that we have so far to date, in the Mattox-Sham Valley Road, we have tested 22 of 22 private wells. The results are 2 came up with non-detect, 8 were less than 20 parts per trillionth, 5 were between 20 and 20 or 200 parts per trillionth, and 7 were greater than 200 parts per trillionth. The remediation measures that we've taken in that area include 11 POET systems installed, up to 4 are pending. And some residents may require more than one, so that's why some of the numbers don't jive there. And all residents over a non-detect are currently being provided bottled water. We're also working on the town water main extension, and I'll go into that in a little detail later in the presentation. On the west side of Monahasset Road area, we've tested 32 out of 35 private wells. The results are 19 non-detects, 8 less than 20 parts per trillionth, and 3 between 20 and 200, and none above the 200 parts per trillionth. Remediation measures taken, 1 of 3 pellet systems have been installed, 2 are pending. All residents, again, over non-detect have been provided bottled water, and we're working on that water main extension. In the Nobodere Way area, number of residential, again, we tested 18 of 24 wells have been sampled. The results, I'm going to read this and then I'll provide you a quick update. We have 1 non-detect, 8 less than 20, and 6 between 20 and 200. We just, right before this meeting, received results for 5 more samples in this area, all of which came in below the 20 parts per trillionth. And I don't have the specific data as of exact data as to who and where, but that will be coming out shortly on our website. Remediation in this area, there have been no pellet systems installed, and that's primarily because the residents are within a close vicinity to an existing water line, and that is what I referenced earlier about the policy that the commission approved with hooking into the existing water lines. So we're going to be looking to do that, and I'll go through those timelines in just a minute. And again, all residents above non-detect have been provided bottled water. And this is where I say the town water main connection is in progress. We don't have to put in a water main here. We just have to attach to the existing system. So totals for all residents, number of wells, we sampled 72 out of 81. Results are 22 non-detects, 24 less than 20 parts per trillionth, 14 between 20 and 200, and 7 greater than 200 parts per trillionth. Remediation, 12 pellet systems have been installed, 6 are pending. And again, all residents above non-detect are being provided with bottled water, and the town water service to 3 affected areas, what we're working on. The 5 samples that were currently pending, I believe, are the ones that just came in all below the 20. So this is, I like to refer this to as kind of like our election map, only instead of red and blue, we have 4 different colors. We have green, yellow, red, and purple. And you can see the 3 different study groups. And from lowest to highest, the green is non-detect. The yellow is non-detect up to 20 parts per trillionth. The red is 20 to 200. And then purple is above the 200 parts per trillionth. And again, this presentation and others are available on the website. So we've moved into the area now of testing soils, and we just wanted to provide a little information on that so that folks have an understanding of the difference between the water sampling tests and the soil samples. We're testing for the same 6 compounds. However, the standards are different, and they range from about 300 up to 2,000, with the PFOS to 2,000. So it's the same number of compounds, same type of compounds, but different standards. And I'm going to ask Jim Sokup, the LSP, to correct me and jump in if I'm wrong on any of these, but that's the understanding I have for the soils. We began the soil sampling as part of our Taxiway Echo project phase 1, which is in the black circle shown here on the map. And I'm having a problem with my cursor, but there were 8 samples taken, and 4 were non-detect, 3 were below the 2,000, 1 was above the 2,000, but that area was not disturbed as part of the project. And earlier this week on the 16th and throughout the week, we've performed sampling where all the red dots are on this map for soils, and we're hoping to have those results in short order, I would hope. The water service projects, project 1 includes the Nobodere Way area, and that is connecting residents to existing water mains. Project 2 includes running the line or extending the line down along the west side of the airport, Monahasset Road, across the approach of runway 6 and out down Mattoxam Valley Road. That work is underway, and I'll go through that in just a second what the timeline is there. So our next steps are FAA approvals pending in terms of being able to use airport revenue and make sure it's eligible for use of the connections for the water main and such. The Airport Commission has approved the water service policy. We're developing procedures for service connections, property restoration, and access agreements. On the Novadear Way, Evergreen Way, homeowners with adjacent water service, virtual meetings are looking to begin early December with the homeowners. Also in December, we'll be scheduling individual property visits to determine the required work. And also in December, coordinating permitting with the town and the water company, and hopefully having the connections done to each home within the next 3 to 6 months, weather and permitting dependent. Let's see. On the Mattoxam Valley Road and West Side, we've obtained in November a survey for Mattoxam Valley Road. That was a bit of a challenge, as we all know that sometimes the road doesn't follow the exact right of way that's on the map, so that took a little while. Design water service is going on and happening through December. The permitting is going to take place this winter through the spring. Also this spring, scheduling virtual meetings with the homeowners, and in spring and summer, individual property visits to determine the specific required work. Then we, in the spring and summer, are coordinating additional permitting that we may need, whether it be road openings or building permits or HTC or anything else that may come along. And then hopefully within the next 9 to 12 months, we anticipate connecting water service to the homes with PFAS concentrations greater than 20 parts per trillion. On the investigation and remedial action, we continue sampling and analysis of drinking water wells, monitoring wells, and soil as per the MCP requirements, completing the investigation of potential PFAS sources on airport property, continuing to investigate nature and extent of the airport PFAS impacts and identification of extent of the groundwater plume, and coordinating with town to identify off-airport sources of PFAS, continuing public outreach and communications as we are this evening, and also continue to pursue and secure funding necessary for the investigation and remediation process. And with that, I'd like to thank our team who has put countless hours into this subject and make me look good. My assistant, Noah Carberg, he's done a great job responding to folks. McFarland Johnson, Rich Lasden, tremendous project manager overall for the group. And the professionals at Weston Solutions, Jim Sokup, our licensed site professional, and Lisa Kammer, the project manager, have done, they've just done amazing work, and I appreciate that. And I'd just like to remind you, for public questions and comments, please raise your hand, use the raise your hand function, and we'll call upon you in order. If you don't get your question addressed or have comments after this meeting, please submit them in writing to Noah Carberg, Assistant Airport Manager at ncarberg@nantucketairport.com. And you can visit the website ack-pfas.com. All this information is there, as well as the contact information. So with that, I believe, and if you do go onto that website, there's a quick and easy link to register and be able to jump in with the questions here. With that, I will turn it back to the chairman. And, if you'd like me to continue sharing one of the screens, please just let me know.
Why don't you take it down for the moment? If we need it to refer to, we can come back to it.
Okay.
Thank you. Before we go to public questions, are there any comments, Mr. Lasden, that you would like to make, Mr. Sokop, Ms. Kramer, or our Angela Gallagher and Gerard? Whoops, I'm sorry. Is he still here? Yeah, Gerard Martin, I'm sorry. From Mass DEP, any of you want to say anything before we move into our questions?
I don't have any.
Apparently not. Okay.
I don't think so.
I'm good. I'll wait till questions.
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense.
And do the commissioners have any comments before we move on to the next phase of this? Mr. Gasparo? Ms. Topham?
No, I'd rather wait and hear the respond to comments.
Ms. Topham? Ms. Planzer? Mr. Buscarin?
No.
Okay. All right, we will go forward. Are there some questions in the I think the first question is from Deborah DuBois. Or DuBois, pardon if I pronounce it wrong.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. We are Debbie DuBois and Robert Orlandi, and we live at 42 Okinawa Avenue, approximately 1,000 feet west of the airport fence. Our well water was tested for PFAS, and the result is 41 parts per trillion, 2 times higher than the acceptable EPA guidelines. And what I'd like to do is just to read a 3-minute statement, and I wanted you to know that ahead of time so you don't think that I'm going to go on forever.
I'm sorry, may I ask, was this testing done by the airport?
No, it was not. We asked Weston to test, but they said they couldn't. So we had outside tests done by Contest.
Okay, thank you very much. Go
Sure.
ahead, please.
Okay. We believe that the airport must accept the possibility that the contamination of our well is their responsibility. Simply excluding households because they are hydraulically upgradient of known release areas, not a sufficient explanation. And proposing a laundry list of possible other sources of contamination is unconvincing. We would like to address 2 issues. Number 1, the science defining the fate and transport of PFAS is evolving, but it's clear that it is more complex than groundwater flow direction alone. In September of this year, the Interstate Technology and Regulatory Council PFAS team published technical and regulatory guidance that describes cross-gradient movement of PFAS in sands and soils and how they diffuse in and out from higher to lower concentrations. Mark Brousseau and colleagues at the University of Arizona published 10 technical papers in the last 2 years that describe, quantify, and predict transport phenomena of PFAS in sand and soils. Brousseau has analyzed more than 30,000 samples from 2,500 affected PFAS sites around the world. PFAS movement is quantified as a function of coarse and fine sands and varying soil types in subsurface systems. Environmental conditions related to moisture content and the presence of non-aqueous phase liquids, such as jet fuels and other hydrocarbons, also impact PFAS movement. With these data, he developed a model and found that it can take several decades or longer for PFAS to reach groundwater, and that the amount of PFAS in soil is likely to be orders of magnitude greater than that in groundwater. His model also accounts for a surfactant-induced flow that must be considered. Data from hundreds of AFFF impacted sites have verified the model. Number 2, chart number 4 of today's presentation lists the known AFFF application in the years of 1989 to 2019. The total is estimated to be between 1,900 and 2,500 gallons. A calculation was made that equates this to 10 pounds of PFAS being released every year for 30 years. The AFFF was released into the air, the soil, and the water, both runoff and groundwater. This amount would contaminate 9,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools to the EPA threshold limit of 20 parts per trillion every year for 30 years. In summary, we believe, number 1, the airport has released large amount of PFAS. PFAS can stay in the soil decades before reaching groundwater, and they move in all directions from the original release sites. Number 2, our well and other surrounding wells need to be tested by Weston and be included in the airport's PFAS investigation and response. And lastly, residents should be informed of the Mass Department of Environmental Protection's public statement that if your well is located within 1 to 2 miles of a known source of PFAS, you may wish to consider sampling your water source. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Laston, do you have any response to that, or Mr. Sokop?
I think it's Mr. Sukop that would respond to that.
Mr. Sokop, are you there?
Yep, sorry, I was just finding my mute button to unmute myself. I would like to thank Ms. DuBois for that. It sounds like she's put a lot of time and effort into studying doing background research, and we encourage that. I think that having a knowledgeable base of residents surrounding the airport is good for us. The more people can get on and learn about this, the better. And I appreciate her going out and having that sample collected and folks looking out for themselves. That all said, I think we have evaluated the various modes of transport, contaminant transport that you have stated and discussed here. We have reviewed the ITRC guidance as well. We're very familiar with that. And we have applied those to this site. So a lot of the information that you get online is very non-site specific. It's very generalized, and it's certainly aspects of the contaminant regulation that we do take into account and we do consider. But we have to consider that in the light of the local conditions at this particular site. So what site specifically is going on here? And we have to employ the data that we have. And we have done that. And based on our evaluation of the data that we've collected to date and our understanding of what the hydrogeology is doing, at this point, we do not see a way for contamination from the airport. And I will not disagree with you. The contamination at the airport is significant. I think we realize that, we understand that. The discussion that you had with regard to the amount of PFAS that has been released at the airport, it is substantial, but it is moving predominantly to the south towards the ocean, and which is why our initial focus has been along MVR and the homes there. And the data we've collected so far reflects that. If you look at referring back to the map that Tom showed us earlier with the four colors, the purple colors, the homes that where the groundwater exceeds 200, which are the highest concentrations. Those are very high. I mean, we worked on a lot of sites in Massachusetts and in New England, and those numbers are high. We're not gonna kind of gloss over that. But they are to the south, and which is consistent with our understanding of groundwater flow. So the data we've been collecting does line up with our overall site conceptual model, is that the majority of the flow and the looking at this flow map, those areas of purple, you can trace them back to the release areas, and in fact even to the release areas where we have the higher volumes of AFFF where they were released. So again, the data that we're finding does make sense. Between your specific location or in Okawa, again, you can see there's a very consistent line of green dots between the airport and the homes that are further to the west on Okawa. That tells us that we're not getting that cross gradient diffusive migration that you mentioned. Certainly can that occur? Absolutely can occur. But again, the site-specific data that we're seeing here suggests that it's not occurring in that area. So hopefully that provides a little more insight into your concern.
Thank you, Jim. Ms. DuBois, do you have a brief follow-up? Hearing none, then I will go to the next questioner, Regina Jorgenson.
She's here
Oh,
now.
I'm sorry. Here she is. Go ahead, Mr. DuBois.
Oh, yeah.
Is it DuBois or Dubois?
It's DuBois, and I'm going to let my husband talk since he's the engineer.
And what again is his name?
Rob Orlandi.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, I just have a couple questions regarding some of the results. There are 3 yellows. I know you mentioned a bunch of greens. There are 3 yellows before our property. The other thing I wanted to say is that property HF and MQ were red results. They were located at Webster Road to Skyline, making the right on Webster, and there's a red result there. That's about 1,000 feet from the airport fence. I just want to say, look, I don't want to nitpick and look at various pieces of data. All I'm trying to emphasize is that there are researchers out there, Brousseau in particular at the University of Arizona. I don't know if folks at Weston are aware of his work, but he is saying that it is, and you agreed, that there is some cross gradient flow of PFAS. The PFAS last forever, for a long time. And basically, we believe that that's the only possible explanation for our high result. And we want to emphasize that we're only saying that we want the airport to fess up that there is a possibility that it's from the airport. And we welcome Weston, as I tried to initially get Weston to take our sample, because I realized that when other folks sample, there are questions. And so we still invite Weston to come to our property to take a point of entry sample and find out if indeed we confirm the 41 parts per trillion.
Thank you. I don't think that we can resolve this tonight, but we will take it under advice and get back to you.
Yeah, I guess I would like just to add one thing. I think although at this time we do not believe that the contamination in your particular home is related to the airport, the town has been contacted in regarding that, and they're performing an island-wide study. They've hired a consultant to do that, and also Mass DEP is also looking into that too. So, we are not ignoring you and certainly in your concern. It's just that we feel that it's not related to airport, and there are other entities doing other studies on the island with regard to PFAS as well. Unfortunately, these compounds are extremely ubiquitous. They're in so many different products. There are so many different sources that it also, and I know that you probably don't want to hear this, but it's very likely in your case that it is from another source, and that's what we believe. And again, there are other entities that are looking into the other sources. So we will get to the bottom of this eventually.
Mr. Drake, may I add to that?
Please, Mr. Martin.
And so from the point of view from the Department of Environment Protection, we've been involved in this. We're looking at the work that the airport is doing and this additional information that they're collecting as you get further away from the airport. And for us to require the airport to address the impact to your well, we need to be able to connect the dots between your well and in the release that occurred at the airport, or the releases that occurred at the airport. And based on several lines of evidence that we've discussed, groundwater flow and the distribution of the PFAS in the groundwater based on the sampling of the private wells, we don't have that information that would require us to have the airport. And again, as Jim mentioned, we're not leaving it there. We have had a meeting with the town. As Jim mentioned, they've hired a contractor to look at town-owned properties to see if they have had potential sources of PFAS. We're also, based on information that we're collecting from the airport and from things like you guys sampling your well, looking at what other potential sources might be out there. It's part of the program that we do. We call it site source discovery. We look at where impacts are, and we're doing this at several places across the Commonwealth. Look at the impacted wells, what are potential sources in the area, and start to investigate them to see if they are a potential source and need to be brought into the MCP process, as the airport has been. If, as the airport goes along, they collect more information that shows us that things aren't what we think they are right now, we revisit that as it occurs. But dispersion does occur, and you do have contaminants migrating perpendicular to the direction of groundwater flow. But in materials like this, that is such a sandy aquifer. And I think a couple of weeks ago, Jim told me what the groundwater flow velocity is, and it's pretty high. And that really limits the amount of cross gradient dispersion that you're going to get, because the groundwater is just flowing so fast. So at this point, we don't think it's the airport. We're looking to see if there's other potential sources that we can bring into the process. And as we move forward, hopefully we'll get more information to satisfy you that things are going in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Welcome.
All right, let's move on to the next questioner, as Regina Jorgenson. Ms. Jorgenson?
Hello, can you hear me?
Can.
I thank you so much, and thank you for this great presentation. Thank you for all of your hard work with this issue. And it actually, my question is actually sort of ends up being kind of a follow-up to what was just being talked about. And I guess my basic question is, how do you explain the results in the Nobadir Way area and in the north part of the what I guess is being called the west side area, given everything that you're saying about the groundwater flow and whatnot? If I look at that map, I don't quite understand how those results are coming out that way.
Mr. Soko?
Yep, thank you. Yes, that is a, I don't want to say anomaly. It is a different situation. We believe at this point that that contamination, we're using essentially the same data that we're applying everywhere else, and we're tracing that contamination in the upgrading direction. We actually were out in the this week collecting some additional samples. We identified 3 additional monitoring wells on the airport. We were able to locate those older wells, redevelop those and sample those. We're collecting soil samples and taking soil and groundwater and surface water samples in that area. And we're basically tracking that upstream, if you will, to try and figure out where that is coming from. Because we do recognize that it does not line up with any of the known AFFF application areas. So we are in the process of chasing that upstream and trying to find out where that's coming from. We have some ideas. Did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, that's very helpful. I guess my follow-up question would be, if I was to look at this, of course not being an expert or anything, but my thought would be that you would want to test more to the north of the airport, because if I look at where those colored dots are coming from, there does not appear to be a big region of green indicating that as you go more north, things are getting better. And so I guess, that to me, that seems like kind of an obvious next step. And so I guess I wonder if is any discussion about testing further north.
Well, you got to remember that yellow is actually okay too.
Jim, Jim, excuse me, let me jump in here for just a second.
Oh, sure.
This follows into one of the questions that came up at the last meeting and has recurred since then from a number of people, particularly up in the Macy's Lane area on the northeast side of Airport Road. Not Airport Road, Old South Road. So the question is, have houses on Macy's Lane been affected and or tested? Are you familiar, Jim, of where Macy's Lane is?
Not off the top of my head.
Who's got the cursor? Tom, do you have the cursor? Well, if it's the road on the other side of Old South Road from Airport Road. So if you're coming into the airport but turn the other way, that's Macy's Lane.
Okay. Yep. So yeah, that location is upstream from the airport. It's also upstream from these homes that are, I think it was Regina. Was that your name? had pointed out. But kind of where I was going with this is that, again, you have to remember that yellow is okay too. Yellow means that it's below the standard of 20. So while it's still detected there, it's not above the drinking water criteria. So, looking at the distribution of where the yellow is, you can kind of see that at the north end of Belvedere Way, the concentrations drop off there. You've got a couple of red there that are on the east side of Belvedere Way. Oops, we lost our. Did we lose our
Sorry,
map?
I need to do that for 1 second. I'll get it back here.
So we've some of the wells that we just sampled were to the east of that line of yellow. So we kind of extended that line of yellow onto the airport property, and those are the ones we tested this week. So we're waiting for those results to come back. So we're hoping that will point us in the direction of where the source of that that line of red there that you see kind of originates along Belvedere Way and goes to the south.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, sir. Mr. Lassen, please.
Yeah, so, and part of the other reason that we haven't done more testing up there is that there's public water for those homes. We are looking at this point to test people that have private drinking wells. And the homes up there are on public water.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move into the questions that were asked in writing by people in advance. And I'm also going to give the answers that we'd prepared. And if anybody either the engineers or the lawyers want to jump in, they're welcome to do it. The first question is from Ayesha Khan, a resident. The question is this the taxpayer's responsibility to pay for cleaning up a chemical substance that chemical companies have profited in the billions while not sharing alarming research on health effects for decades? This is the subject of many individual and state lawsuits. One example of one of the violations is the TSCA Section 8E, the requirement that companies report to the EPA substantial risk information about chemicals they manufacture, process, or distribute in commerce. This was not done, and these chemicals are responsible for one of the largest civil administrative penalties the federal EPA has ever obtained under any federal environmental statute. It's hard to understand why the burden of cleanup falls on the taxpayers. Shouldn't the polluters pay? The response to that is the simple answer to this is that environmental cleanup laws, both in the Commonwealth and I think the federal government, create strict no-fault liability for property owners like the airport in the first instance to make sure that the contamination is addressed. But those statutes also preserve rights in a variety of ways to seek reimbursement from the polluter. This is what the suit against the manufacturers is about. And the commission will also be exploring whether other parties are responsible and also should also pay for a cleanup. Anything to add to that answer by anybody? All right, we have another question from a participant in the meeting, Mr. Matt Peel. Mr. Peel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's actually his wife, Mary Lepre, and I'm just calling because we live in this area and I'm wondering, does the depth of the well affect, because I found it very interesting the way things were scattered, and that if people who had wells that were maybe 30 to 35 feet deep versus 60 feet deep, if that affected that. And I also am curious if the town will be paying for these people to hook up to well water, or if that's going to be the homeowner, even though, or the airport, I guess, even though it was the airport that caused this problem. Thanks.
Mr. Sukup, do you want to address the first question about the depth of the wells?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very astute observation. And that's something that we're looking into right now. We're struggling a little bit with trying to find the well records because a lot of these homes have been there for a while and the wells are older. So it's hard to find reliable information on the well depths, but that is a topic that we are researching. And you're absolutely right. The depth of the well and where that water is coming from could be an important factor in tracing where this contamination goes. So kudos to you. You're right on the mark there, and we are chasing that down.
Anybody else want to comment on that? On the second question, Ms. Lepre, to your response to your second question, yes, the airport is paying for it. At this point, no taxpayer funds are involved in the remediation by the airport. It is all coming from airport revenues, and will have to be bonded and turned into long-term debt. And we hope you get your support and other people's support at annual town meeting to authorize that debt. You have a follow-up? Ms. Lepre? All right. The next question is from Jennifer Cabot, also a resident. She said, our property well water tested positive for PFAS above 2 parts per trillion, but below 20 parts per trillion. Is there any guidance for landlords disclosure that might be required? Is there any such guidance for swimming pools? The answer prepared by our lawyer and our engineer said the airport cannot give a private party legal advice on their disclosure requirements. Only a licensed site professional working on behalf of the property owner can confirm disclosure information. Regarding the swimming pool, the test result numbers provided suggest there is not an ingestion risk. So based on current Mass DEP standards, the water is safe to drink. The numbers are well below the suggested dermal contact criteria from Mass DEP, which is 200 parts per trillion. So the swimming pool is not a risk, even from an incidental ingestion standpoint. The next question is from Emily Molden. I think we've addressed some of this, but we can get into a little more with the Nantucket Land Council, and she can follow up because she's here. I don't know if she's registered. Her question is, I am interested if additional investigation is taking place to confirm groundwater flow direction across the airport property, as well as identification of the contamination plume boundaries. Confirming groundwater flow direction with specific site data should be relatively inexpensive and should provide very valuable insight to potential short-term and long-term ramifications of this particular contamination, as well as responding to ongoing community concerns. Thank you. The answer, which Mr. Sukup can elaborate on if he'd like to, we are working right now to collect more water level data at the airport to verify the groundwater flow direction. We were able to locate, as he said, and redevelop 3 additional existing monitoring wells and collect groundwater elevations in them this week. These data will be used to supplement measures from the other 4 wells at the site. Additional monitoring wells are planned for the airport property to help define the PFAS impacts and confirm groundwater flow. Please understand that this is not an inexpensive task, but the airport is committed to implementing this work, and it will be done once the soil sampling and the related reports required by Mass DEP are completed. The soil sampling, as was noted earlier, began this week. Are there any, do you want to add anything to that now, Mr. Sukup?
I don't think so. I think that addresses the question.
Ms. Molden, do you have any further comments or questions? See your hand is up, so hopefully we can get you in here.
Thanks so much for the opportunity and for providing that information. I appreciate that the the airport is looking into more site-specific groundwater data. Obviously, the information that is pre-existing is not necessarily been updated for quite some time. So it's great that you're looking into that further. And I guess my only follow-up question would just be if that information will just come out as part of a future report once additional data is compiled. Thanks.
Mr. Sukup?
Yes, it will. We are reporting our information that this project is very fast moving. We're collecting a lot of data. I think as Tom had mentioned earlier, over 170 samples collected to date, and we're out in the field, as I mentioned, this week. And we actually, I think we collected a bunch more samples this week. So we are generating a lot of data, week to week. That data is reported, as Tom mentioned earlier, in IRA status reports, and those are issued once a month to Mass DEP. Once those are issued, they're posted on the website. So I encourage you to everyone really to stay up to date. Check that website. We issue those reports on around the 4th of the month. So the first week of the month is when we issue those IRA status reports, and it includes all the data that we've collected for the last month. So they're usually updated to the website shortly after we issue them to the Mass DEP. So please keep an eye out for that. That's where these data, the additional water levels and an assessment of groundwater flow, updated assessment of groundwater flow will be provided, would be in those reports.
This is Drake. May I add to this discussion?
Please, Mr. Martin.
To manage expectations a little bit, these studies can take a really long time to complete, to figure out the full extent of contamination. And the MCP is set up in kind of a standard way to go through these studies in a standard way. But when we first find out about the release, we want to focus on the highest potential risk situations. And that's done under, as Jim mentioned, an IRA, which is immediate response actions. I tend to talk in acronyms. And so if we do and you don't know what we're talking about, just ask. So where the immediate response action that Nantucket is conducting that we'd like them to focus on initially is the impacted private wells and deal with those. And then we've talked about sampling soils because one of the things we'd like the airport to do is look at the potential source areas, try to identify areas where there might be high levels in the soil that is leaching to the groundwater. And maybe that can be addressed on the short term too, to reduce the amount of PFAS getting to the groundwater. Once they get the immediate response action done, they start to do comprehensive response actions, which is the full study of the full extent of the contamination and the overall risk associated with the releases. And the deadlines that are allowed in the Massachusetts contingency plan is once we're notified or we notify a potentially responsible party of a release, they have a year to try to clean up the site without getting into the long-term assessment, which is not going to happen here because this is a pretty big site. And then once that year comes along, they have to tear, classify, and start doing comprehensive response action. That 1 year deadline is this March. And then from the date in March, they have 3 years to submit a phase 2 comprehensive site assessment, which is the extent of contamination. So these do take a long time, which is why we want them to focus on these higher risk situations and try to deal with them before all this time is spent to figure out what's going on. It may be quicker than this to get the phase 2 completed, but that is the date that the regulations allow. And we actually changed that from 2 years to 3 years recently because it was so difficult to get this work done on a lot of sites within the 2 years that we previously had. So this is a very time-consuming process.
Thank you. Ms. Molden, do you have a follow-up or are you all set?
No, thank you. I'm all set. I appreciate that follow-up.
Great, thank you. Ms. Lepre apparently has another question. Matt Peel's hand is up.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is about the well, as far as the shallow wells One, all of that information is very easily accessible from the building department, which I understand has been somewhat closed. But I was able to go down there and get the well completion form from my house that was built in 1985. But would it be possible to make the wells deeper? Would that sort of mitigate some of this? I'm just curious.
Mr. Sokup, could you address that, please?
Well, that's a tough question. Tough question. That's possible, and there are some locations and some types of geology where that will work. At this point, we don't know enough about the extent of the contamination and vertically and the distribution of the contamination to know whether that would be an option here or not. It's possible. It's possible that would be an option. At this point, we just don't have enough information to be able to know at this point.
Mr. Gerard, do you have anything to add to that?
That, as Jim alluded to, it is tricky, not only from the point of view as we don't know the full vertical extent of contamination at this time, but sometimes aquifer characteristics change as you go deeper. I know we worked in one location where the iron concentration increased significantly with depth, and they tried to do that. They had shallow impacted wells. They put them in deeper, and the iron became a big problem for the residents. So it is tricky, and I think the way the airport is addressing this makes sense.
I think to kind of further complicate things too, we have to remember that we're on an island here, and an island that's in a sand and gravel aquifer. So there's a bottom to the groundwater. It is underlain by salt water, and it's. I don't want to get too deeply into the hydrogeologic concepts here because it's kind of an advanced topic. But you can actually draw up salt water from underneath if you drill a deep well and you start pumping deeper. So you may be under the contamination, but then you may pull up salt water from deeper in the aquifer. So it's similar to what you're.
But aren't the Wanacomot Water Company wells very deep, like 1,000 feet? Maybe
They may be. I'm not that familiar with all those wells. How deep they are.
I don't want to spread misinformation, but I have a recollection of that.
Yeah, there's a concept called draw up. We often hear about draw down when you pump a well. If you pump a well and draw down, you pull down the water level. And generally, in a marine type situation like this, the ratio of draw up to draw down is can be as much as 10 to 1. So meaning if you draw the water level down 1 foot, you can draw the saltwater interface up 10 feet. So it's a tricky hydrogeologic situation.
All right, Jennifer Cabot.
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for your help so far. A quick question. The 2 water wells that we have on our property tested differently. So this is sort of in relation to the last question asked regarding the depth of the wells. Are there other factors that may have been caused the 2 readings to come out so differently? One is around 3 and the other is around 13. Is the age of the well in addition to the depth of the well, or is the age of the plumbing a factor, or the main house that has the lower reading has a whole water house filtration system? Does that factor into the readings of the PFAs, or any of those factors, I guess is my question.
There's many factors that come into a PFAS reading, and certainly the ones that you mentioned could affect that variation. The other thing too, and certainly as we've been talking about, the depth of the wells may have different depths, so they're pulling from slightly different zones. So that may have an effect. Also, when you have 2 wells, even if they're close together, they're pulling from 360 degrees, so a full circle around that well. And so, one well, if the wells are located, say, in an east-west line, one is east of the other, one's pulling more water from the west, the other one's pulling more water from the east. So they are pulling water from slightly different areas. And as we can see from all the results that we've plotted, all the circles that we showed on Tom's map with the different colors, the concentrations vary as you move around in the aquifer. So if the wells are pulling from slightly different areas, you're going to have slightly different concentrations. And the other thing we have to remember too is that these concentrations are extremely low. So 2 part per trillion versus 13 part per trillion. Really, there's not a lot of difference between those two numbers. It sounds like a lot. It sounds like, oh, it's 11 part per trillion difference. But these concentrations are so low, it's really not that much different.
Right. The only reason the second well that read at 13 parts was a factor is because the ratings in New Jersey actually have that limit as their safe limit, not 20 parts. And that's how we found out our well water had PFAs to begin with. So I guess it is interesting. They're only 100 feet apart, but one is more southeasterly located towards the airport, the one that tested higher. So I suppose that possibly is a factor. And it's a newer well, but I guess I'm just trying to figure out how they could have varied so much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cabot. There was one other question. There are no other hands up. Your hand is still up, Ms. Cabot. Do you still have a question? No, okay. Yes? All right, she's shown as being muted, so. The one other question hanging over from the July information meeting was the question of whether we looked into replacing the airport firefighters' protective gear with gear that does not have PFAS in the material. The airport has since, as I acknowledged back then, we hadn't thought about that, but we certainly have been thinking about it since. The airport has budgeted funds to cover new gear for the firefighters. However, until the National Association for Fire Prevention certifies PFAS-free gear, there is not much we can do because that certification is required. It's a little bit like the underwriter's lab certification for electrical equipment. The airport is working closely with the fire department on the issue, and hopefully there'll be an answer soon, but we don't know when. Thank you all. Do the commission, members of the commission have, or first of all, do any of you have any further comments? Mr. Martin? Do you have anything further you want to say?
I don't think so.
Thank you for your participation and your Ms. Gallagher too. Mr. Sukup, do you have anything you want to say?
Nope, I do not.
Mr. Lasden?
Then if people have follow-up questions, send them into the website or to Mr. Carberg, and we will provide answers as requested.
Members of the commission, Mr. Gasparo?
I would just briefly also thank all attendees, both public as well as our consultants and DEP. I think it's very helpful both for the commission and the public to hear directly at the same time from the regulatory authorities as well as our consultants. I found the back and forth very informative, and I hope the public did as well. And I would just reiterate the point made by Mr. Sukop with respect to the wealth of availability of information in the monthly IRA reports. I personally have found that to be a very useful source to stay apprised as well of the work that's being done by the consultants, and that's available, as he said, on the website that's in the presentation, ACT-PFAS. And thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Planzer, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
Ms. Topham?
I think she had to leave, Dan.
Oh, she may have left. Mr. Buscarin? Is he still here? Yes, he is. I'm hearing nothing. He has nothing to say, he indicates. All right, well, before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I would like to thank you all for taking this Friday evening to be with us and to share this very important information with us and with our neighbors. at the airport. We appreciate that, and thank you all very much. And I wish you all a very happy and safe and healthy Thanksgiving. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Gasparo. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. How do you vote, Ms. Topham? Oh, Mr. Topham's gone. Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer.
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? And Mr. Drake votes aye. Thank you all very much again. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank
Bye.
you, you too.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
bye.